This is an NJN News special report. Governor Whitman's State of the State address.
Hello, I'm Kent Manahan. Welcome to New Jersey Network's coverage of Governor Whitman's State of the State address. The governor will deliver her fourth State of the State speech to a joint session of the legislature in just a few minutes. The 208th legislature was sworn into office earlier today. Senate President Donald DeFrancesco was sworn in for another term by Chief Justice Deborah Poritz in the Senate chamber, along with other members of the upper house. Meanwhile, state assembly members were sworn into office during ceremonies at the College of New Jersey in Ewing Township. The entire legislature has now gathered in the assembly chambers in Trenton, and that's where NJN senior political correspondent Michael Aron is standing by now. Michael?
Kent, the legislators are just beginning to filter into the chamber. As you noted, this is Governor Whitman's fourth State of the State address as she begins her fifth year as governor. But for the first time in the more than 150 years that governors have been giving State of the State addresses, this one will be simulcast on the internet. Now, the governor in this speech and in the two other speeches she's to give over the next 3 weeks, her inaugural address next week and her budget message in February, will outline her second-term agenda. There are some who believe that coming off of a close re-election victory, the governor needs to reassert herself a bit in these speeches, needs to grab the spotlight again. The big issues that come out of that election obviously were auto insurance and property taxes, also some education issues were big in the election. It's pretty clear that she's going to discuss those either today or in the two remaining speeches. Other issues on her plate, according to her, are urban revitalization, open space preservation, and the downsizing of government, the continued downsizing of government. There's a lot of speculation about how the governor will handle a second term, whether governors can accomplish things in second terms. We're going to talk about that now with two guests. We have joining us the Democratic State Chairman, Tom Giblin of Essex County, and the Republican State Chairman, Chuck Haytaian of Warren County. Mr. Giblin, do you think governors can get as much done in second terms as in first terms?
I think it's going to be a little bit difficult for Governor Whitman because of the close margin of the election. It's my observation that somehow the legislature with the Senate and Assembly seem to be more in charge because I think they feel they gave her the coattails to enable her victory. But I'm sure that she has an agenda that she's going to strike as far as trying to move the state forward, and certainly things can be done in a bipartisan manner.
Mr. Haytaian, what about the governor's ability to get things done in his second term and this notion that the legislature is now sort of in the saddle?
Well, I'm a former speaker, and the legislature is never in the saddle. The governor is the person who is the most powerful governor of any in the United States, and Governor Whitman is a take-charge person. She will get her program through. Now, if you were to talk to me 2 years from now, I may speak differently. But at this point in time, she is in charge. She's the governor. She's got a line item veto, and she appoints all of the cabinet. So I think she's in charge, and we'll show that.
Democrats like Mr. Giblin do note that the governor seems to be a little weaker vis-a-vis the legislature, particularly with two legislative leaders who are said to be eyeing the governor's chair 4 years from now. What do you make of that speculation?
Listen, I worked with Don DeFrancesco for 4 years. I worked with Jack Collins for 4 years. He was my majority leader. They are team players. They will do what's right for the state of New Jersey, working with a Republican governor. Democrats love to think there's always going to be a problem. That doesn't happen with the Republicans, and I'm proud to say they are all team players, and you'll see that.
Mr. Giblin, speaking of DeFrancesco and Collins and the governorship and the jockeying that could go on, some people have been saying that this really helps Whitman, that it plays into her hand, that these two guys are going to want to do the right thing if they want to position themselves to be governor, and the three Republicans together can really get some things done.
Well, first of all, it's interesting to note that the Democrats really set the agenda for this legislature in terms of the issues of car insurance, property taxes, and the issues of education. Certainly, I know that the Republican leaders, whether in the Senate or the Assembly, will be looking to do what's right as far as the voters in New Jersey. If they're looking to run as candidates for governor in 2001, they're going to be viewed as consensus builders. I'm sure whatever the governor's program, if it makes sense, they will try to carry that. If not, they will carve their own way.
I wonder what you gentlemen think are the pressures that are on the governor and these legislators at the moment coming from the public. For example, we read in the newspapers that Governor Whitman is considering further downsizing of state government. Is there pressure in the public at large to keep cutting state government and cutting state taxes, or are the pressures to do other things? Mr. Giblin?
Well, I think the public is very sensitive about the issue of taxes, that people want to see their taxes kind of stabilized. Some of these issues of downsizing, it's questionable whether they really worked or not, even the issues of privatization in some of these state institutions. But I think people want to see the rate of growth in state government spending slow down dramatically.
Mr. Haytaian, what do you think the pressures are on the governor and the legislature? What issues is the public trying to send a message on?
The public is always interested in cutting costs. They like to have spending controlled. They want taxes reduced. That's what Republicans are about. And by the way, Democrats have jumped on board vis-a-vis the president. He wants to cut taxes now. He's got a surplus. He's got a Republican Congress, so that's what happens. I think you'll see the public putting pressure on automobile insurance. And I think you'll see the legislature coming around with the governor and coming to a deadline and saying, we are going to present an insurance reform package by a certain date. I think you'll hear that today. I think you're going to see property taxes where the governor is going to be very bold in suggesting that the public take charge, meaning they should have a vote on any property tax increases. I think those are important items for a governor to come forward in the state of the state.
I guess embedded in my question was a notion that the public seems more interested in holding local government accountable and cutting local government costs in the current climate than state government. Yes or no?
That's probably true, because I think we all know that local government is closer to the voter, especially people, whether it be in their towns or the counties. They feel a closer kinship than sometimes to the people in the state government. They sometimes feel they can't reach out necessarily and touch a governor or a member of the legislature, where they can certainly reach out for their mayor or councilman and express their concerns about what's happening in their local municipality.
You agree that there's more pressure to cut at the local level than the state level?
Oh yeah, I would agree with Tom on that. I think we understand, because we come from county government and local government as well, so we understand those types of pressures. And by the way, Mike, you know that at this point, state taxes have been cut 15 times. It just comes a point where how much more is too much. And I think you'll see that the governor will be talking about controlling spending. That's very important, and creating jobs. So we're going to see taxes being held down. We're going to see a situation where costs are going to be held down and expenditures, but also she's got to create jobs, because our unemployment rate is at a very good level, although I'd like it lower today. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen all the time. When you're below 5, that's not bad, as they say in the old country. So I think you're going to see the pressures on the local officials to do what we did in the state. We have state mandate, state pay. We have taken over the court systems here in the legislature through the governor and the legislature. We have done the work in gross receipts. I think all of that is really helping the local municipalities with their property taxes. Now I think the people in the state are going to say, okay, the state has helped you with all these new proposals. Now what are you doing to hold down costs?
All right, well, I imagine we're going to hear the governor address that. In fact, I've seen an advanced text of her speech, and she is going to address that. And I want to thank Tom Giblin and Chuck Haytaian. As Mr. Haytaian noted, unemployment is low in the state. There's talk in Trenton of a budget surplus, as there is at the federal level. First time we've heard the word surplus in a number of years. We'll see over the course of this speech and the next several speeches whether the governor refers to that and what she plans to do with it. For now, I'm Michael Aron in the Assembly Chamber, which is rapidly filling up with legislators. Let's go back to you, Kent.
Thank you, Michael. And of course, we will rejoin you shortly when the governor is to begin her State of the State address. And I'm joined now here in our NJN Trenton studios by our two NJN political analysts, Republican Roger Bodman and Democrat Jim McQueeny. Gentlemen, welcome. And Roger, this is the first, as Michael said, of the three major speeches which the governor will deliver one right after the other in the coming weeks.
What we're calling a trifecta.
And I think she refers to it. We've seen an advanced copy of her text also.
Triple axle, I think, is the phrase she uses. But
and what does she have to accomplish out of the box today?
This is really a very important speech for her, as are the two that follow, where she has to really hit the ground running, in my view, with some bold initiatives. And I think you'll see she's doing just that in this speech. She came off a close re-election. Second-term governors, some people say, are lame ducks. She's already announced the fact that she's got 4 years to quack, and I'm sure she will quack loudly. And this speech is the first attempt for her to do that. And I think you'll see some very
kind
bold
of a
initiatives.
scene setter.
Absolutely right.
Perhaps outlining a lot of the
this
things.
speech and the inaugural speech both are really theme type speeches, broad in approach, and the budget speech is much more detailed, dollar oriented, and so forth.
We've heard the talk about the power play and the governor's need to perhaps do that today in this first of the three speeches. Jim, can she do that?
Well, she has to do that. Picking up from something Roger said before, of the two first speeches she has here are really the blue sky speeches. You could basically give the vision in the way you want it. Not a lot of contesting about it right now because the real important speech ends up being, I disagree a little bit, that this is not the most important thing. It's the budget speech, because that's where the money is dedicated to support the blue sky.
The devil
is in the details, and that'll be next month. And that'll be interesting, most interesting to see where she puts the resources behind the vision that she has. But on the issue of the political colloquy at work here, it's a very, very interesting situation, because you have this governor really giving a speech, and she'll turn, as she does typically here, to the Speaker and the Assembly Speaker and the Senate President and acknowledge them. But in a sense, she's also acknowledging that these are the two most likely successors in her own party to run for governor, since she's prohibited from running again. And you're going to have people in the legislature controlling it with lopsided majorities, the Republicans, sitting there, each of them wanting to be really governor, looking basically at this thing, wanting to cooperate right now, but separately wanting to fashion their own identities and agendas after that. The key thing is here, get control for the governor at the beginning, and that's what she's going to attempt to do.
So what does that mean for the governor then, facing this situation, and how does she, in your estimation, have to play it then?
Well, as I just said a minute ago, this speech starts to outline the broad themes of her administration, her second administration. So what she's going to take on some tough issues, and I think we'll see that in the next hour or so ahead as she presents this speech. Issues such as property tax reform and home rule, and really going at education in a major way, a systemic way, going at the underlying problems here in a state that has a love affair with home rule and local government. She's saying maybe we ought to think about these things a little bit. Maybe we ought to think about, can we pay for all this, and do the people out there want to keep paying high property taxes for the privilege of all this government?
Well, we see in the early advance text that we have a copy of the themes that the governor is going to hit right out of the box in this speech: auto insurance reform and property tax. The property tax issue, of course, the two issues that drove the 1997 election. But her own members of her own party, former governors and other governors, have said that these are two issues that, in effect, the governor can do very little about. So how do these issues ring in your estimation?
Well, I think the governor sets a signal, a tone, a pace on what her expectations would be. I think that that moral suasion or body language that you need to do is a factor. She has the podium, the bully pulpit for a while, which would be helpful for the legislature on these two issues, but it really is pretty much in their hands. Roger said before about getting into the details of the systemic changes that have to happen in a second term. Well, you might argue, well, why weren't these things really taken care of in the details in the first term perhaps, because a lot of the decisions and the leadership of the first term were really directed in reaction to court decisions on education and healthcare funding and the like, reaction to court decisions of inaction. So you have the dynamic of a second term really doing it in the details that maybe you should have done in the first term.
Jim, you could even say, why weren't some of these problems attacked in years ahead in previous administrations? I mean, take school districts, for example, which is one of the issues she deals with here. We have over 600 school districts in this state, in a relatively small state. We have more school districts than we have towns. Compared to Maryland, say, we have 24 school districts, a county school system, if you will. She's starting to address those kinds of questions. Are they politically volatile? Absolutely. They're very volatile. And I would suggest that she can still win this issue and not get it through the legislature. She may not win these battles.
Well,
but she's going to be the populist out there fighting for this kind of change and giving the voice to the people on saying, here's some options for you, voters of New Jersey. Here's your chance to vote literally on some of these questions.
It's tough, even when you get something you mentioned before, other governors on some of these issues. On auto insurance, for instance, Florio, same thing last time, said, I want this done by March 30th, ironically, after he was in last time. And they did have a plan in place some weeks before that. Unfortunately, I guess as things turned out, it was the wrong plan. Judging by the fact we're fixing it again.
They often are.
You have these challenges, and as a governor can make that statement, let's have it done, but what gets done is the key thing. It gets to your point. What does get done on these two issues?
And setting a deadline like March 30th, is that something that is attainable? Is that something that's challenging? And then
don't think
you go
that,
after and suppose it doesn't happen.
I don't think Governor Whitman and Senator DeFrancesco and Assembly Speaker Jack Collins would have agreed to the deadline without some inkling they could get it done.
Something is already underway.
Right.
I believe we are now going to send it back to Michael Aron, who is standing by in the Assembly chambers, where perhaps the governor is about ready to enter there and begin her State of the State address. Michael?
Ken, it feels like we're a few minutes away still. Many of the legislators are not in their seats. I'm joined by two members of New Jersey's congressional delegation, the dean of the congressional delegation, Republican Marge Roukema of Ridgewood, and a former member of the congressional delegation, former Congressman Dick Zimmer, who ran for the U.S. Senate against Bob Torricelli a year and a half ago, didn't quite make it, and is sometimes said to be thinking about running again. Is that the case?
It's sometimes said that I am thinking, yes, that is the case.
Let me ask each of you what you're looking for here today in the governor's State of the State address. Congresswoman?
Well, I'm looking for ways that the New Jersey delegation can help the state of New Jersey. I think the governor has always been very aware of the close relationship between state and federal government, and we like to do as much as we can at the federal level. This particular year, we are going to have a real challenge. We in New Jersey and the Northeast have got to protect ourselves on highway money, and I'm sure that the governor is counting on us to do that. At the same time, I know that she's going to lead the way on educational issues and certainly other local issues that are of extreme importance to all of us.
Mr. Zimmer, what are you looking for today?
Well, I hope that she's going to address the pocketbook issues that people care a lot about. I understand that she's going to have a dramatic proposal about property tax reform, which I think is going in the right direction, giving voters and taxpayers more control over their own property tax bills.
Do you think that her standing was harmed in any way by the closeness of her election victory over Jim McGreevey?
She's the governor, and the governor gets all the power, regardless of whether she wins by a single vote. I think that she'll work just fine with the legislature, and I think that based on the lame duck session, she may have even a closer and a better working relationship than she did in the prior 4 years.
Congresswoman, very quickly, and a member of this assembly wants to challenge you this year in the Republican primary. Scott Garrett of Sussex County, your feeling about having a challenger on your right in the primary?
Well, I think that we just have to take the issues to the people and take my record, and I'm sure they will endorse me and support me as they have in the past. We put New Jersey first, and we put economic and pocketbook issues first, bringing the money back to New Jersey.
Congresswoman Marge Roukema, former Congressman Dick Zimmer. We're going to go back to Kent Manahan in the studio. Take it away, Kent.
Michael, thank you. And we hear the Senate President gaveling the chamber there to order. So perhaps very shortly now the governor will enter and begin to make her remarks in her fourth State of the State address. But of course, we're here in our Trenton studio awaiting that and joined by Jim McQueeny and Roger Bodman. And we were discussing what we expect to hear the governor say in just a short time from now in her State of the State address. And we heard Michael talking earlier when he was talking to the party leaders, Democratic and Republican party leaders in the state, about the fact that the governor is faced with the Senate president and a speaker who have aspirations perhaps of their own to run for governor someday, and some of the challenges that might present as she embarks in a second term and trying to make her mark and go out in front, as you say, Jim, and do that today, right out of the box with her State of the State address.
Right. I think Tom Giblin, the Democratic state chairman, made a telling point here about bipartisan tone, bipartisan cooperation. Because of this issue between DeFrancesco and Collins as it emerges over time, there may create an opening for the Democrats who hold small minorities right now in both those houses to have an overly influential, I would argue properly influential, role in a lot of these programs, frankly, because you're going to get a lot of defections for one reason or another over time in these coalitions in the legislature, the Republican coalitions. And the Democrats, it creates a vacuum that they can step into and basically have as I said, a disproportionate impact to the numbers that they have in the legislature.
I think, Kent, that you have a situation here potentially where some of the issues that the governor's outlining here are issues that I think will appeal to a Republican base. base vote, and that's going to be very important to Jack Collins or Don DeFrancesco should they seek to run for the Republican nomination. Because in order to run for governor, one must win the Republican nomination first, and by and large, that's a conservative voting bloc. And hence, I think some of these issues that are outlined here would be appealing to that body of voters, and therefore Senator DeFrancesco and Assembly Speaker Collins may pay heed.
Well, conversely, Roger, one issue that does raise then a Republican suburban governor dealing with a program to Republican suburban legislative heads there creates possibly a vacuum of urban concerns. I mean, that's going to be the real challenge to bridge. For Democrats too, trying to bring the majority of those people interested in suburban issues back to these urban issues.
I'd just say this: that in order for the Republican, any Republican, in my opinion, to succeed Governor Whitman after her serving 8 years as governor, that her second term has got to be a success. It's got to, she has got to get some of her programs through. Her popularity has to be on the rise. Things have to look good in order to have a Republican. We have a history in the state of going from Republican to Democrat governors. If one looks at the election results over the last 30, 40 years, hence, in my view, their future, the legislature's future, and anyone that wants to be governor, succeeding Governor Whitman on the Republican side, would be well suited to try to help her get her program through.
Is there a so-called window of opportunity, and is there a deadline on that window that the governor is facing as she strikes out in a second term?
Well, I think largely by past governors, it probably is about a year of a good start. I think former Governor Tom Kean said that recently. You get a good running start, about 9 months,
a year to 18 months in my opinion.
And in that year, in this state, the legislature is not up for re-election. So that works in her favor, too.
Right.
They don't face re-election.
The Assembly is up in the year 1999, as you know, and so all eyes are already somewhat on that election. But absolutely right. And, she has 18 months, on the outside, in my view, to really get her programs underway.
All right, Jim and Roger, I'm told now we're going to go back to the Assembly chamber where Michael Aron is standing by to pick it up from here. Michael?
Kent, the Assembly Speaker has just asked the Escort Committee to escort the governor into the chamber. The Escort Committee this year, Assembly Republicans Barbara Wright and Gerald Zecker, Assembly Democrats Reed Gusciora and Nellie Poe, Senate Republicans Diane Allen and Martha Bark, Senate Democrats Winona Lippman and Shirley Turner. They're escorting the governor into the chamber right now. This will be the governor's first of 3 major speeches. Her inaugural address is a week from today. Her budget message, tentatively set for February 10th. In these 3 speeches beginning today, the governor will begin to outline her agenda for a second term. There's much talk in newspapers, on op-ed pages here at the State House about what a second term consists of, what a governor can do in a second term. The consensus seems to be that a governor can do a lot in a second term, that unfettered by having to run for re-election, a governor can do what he or she believes in a second term, can take on tough issues, can take on politically unpopular programs and stands. We'll see what the governor has in mind for her second term. As we heard Jim McQueeny and Kent Manahan and Roger Bodman say, she has perhaps a year, perhaps 2 years, some say a full 4 years to implement her vision for the state. Let's hear the governor's 4th State of the State address.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Governor of the State of New Jersey, the Honorable Christine Todd Whitman.
Back again. We've done this. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, Madam Chief Justice, distinguished members of the legislature, honored guests, fellow New Jerseyans. With the Winter Olympics right around the corner, I feel a little bit like a figure skater right now, trying to prepare to execute a triple axel. I have to give this speech, the inaugural address,
and the budget address, all within a few weeks of one another, and land on my feet every time. But having them so close together does provide one advantage, and that is that I don't have to jam every conceivable policy idea and topic into just one speech, and that's something that you should be thankful for as well. So I can keep some of them on ice until next week or next month. So let me begin this speech by thanking you, the people of New Jersey. Thank you for giving me the honor of serving you again as governor, for the privilege of having the greatest job in the greatest state in America, and for the opportunity to continue to make New Jersey an even better place in which to live and work and raise a family. And that is just what I intend to do. With the support of the people and the commitment of this legislature, we will continue to build on the successes of the past 4 years. And believe me, we have succeeded. We have made a difference. It's not just the 225,000 new jobs or the fact that they are good jobs with New Jerseyans earning the third highest wages in the country. It's what these jobs mean for the families that depend on them. It's not just our historic success in fighting crime or the fact that we've driven crime to a 23-year low. It's the sense of security that comes from knowing that our families are protected by the new and tougher laws we've put on the books. And it's not just the 115,000 acres of open space and farmland we've preserved. It's the satisfaction of knowing that our children and our children's children will be able to enjoy the natural beauty of New Jersey for all time. It's not just the fact that we've cut the welfare rolls by a third. It's the knowledge that in New Jersey, we put a premium on work and require it of those still receiving welfare. It's not just the first-class facilities that are springing up in our urban centers. It's the certainties that our cities are coming back strong. And it's not just the education standards we've put into place. It's the feeling of pride that we can give our children the knowledge to succeed anywhere in the world. All of these changes are part of why the Children's Rights Council ranked New Jersey as one of the top 10 states in which to raise a child. And they show how much we can accomplish together. Without the hard work of Senate President Don DeFrancesco and Assembly Speaker Jack Collins and Majority Leaders John Bennett and Paul DiGaetano, we would not have come so far so fast. As Aristotle said, and my parents actually quoted this to me, well begun is half done. Ladies and gentlemen, we have begun well. Now I want to answer the question, what's next? What are our priorities for the coming 4 years? What are we going to do to make New Jersey an even better place in which to live, work, and raise a family? I think our priorities are clear. We have to make New Jersey more affordable. We have to make New Jersey schools, every one of them, the best that they can possibly be. And we have to make sure that every home, every street, and every neighborhood in New Jersey is safe for the law-abiding people of our state. Let's begin by reducing the cost of auto insurance and easing the burden of property taxes for the people of our state. I promised during the recent campaign that I would vigorously address these issues in a new term, and that's exactly what I intend to do. Let me start with auto insurance. It's no secret to anyone in this chamber that New Jersey has the costliest auto insurance in the nation, $50 more than the next highest state. The reasons are also clear. We are the most urbanized state in America. We have more registered cars and trucks per highway mile than any other state. We tend to sue each other a lot, and we pay a high price for fraud. In addressing the high cost of auto insurance, we have begun well. Last summer, we ended the practice of automatic annual rate increases and saved New Jersey drivers $150 million in higher rates. We put the brakes on unfair surcharges that were punishing good drivers for minor infractions. We told insurance companies that the days of dropping good drivers for no good reason were over for good. And we put real teeth into our fight against fraud. If insurance companies don't report suspicious claims, it will cost them $25,000 every time until they get it right. If doctors or other professionals cheat the system, it will cost them their professional licenses. Taken together, all of these actions are saving New Jersey drivers money. But clearly, we need to build on our good beginning. I've said it before, and I will say it again. New Jersey will never have the lowest auto insurance rates in the country, but that doesn't mean we have to have the highest. This legislature has formed a joint bipartisan committee to complete the job, co-chaired by the Senate President and the Speaker. This marks the first time in state history that such a high-level committee has been formed to tackle such a highly challenging problem. It's a good sign that we're not just spinning our wheels when it comes to auto insurance. We're going after real reform. We all know what real reform entails. Real reform will guarantee real savings. With real reform, every good driver will be able to afford car insurance. Real reform will minimize cost shifts to health insurance, and it will do all this without encouraging additional lawsuits. That's real reform. I'm encouraged by how much your committee has already done, and I'm delighted with the commitment that the Speaker and the Senate President have given me to have a bill ready for my signature by March the 30th. We are united in our determination to address this problem, and we will. And gentlemen, I want to say thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Of course, there's another important affordability issue that requires our full attention: property taxes. Property taxes in New Jersey are too high. The people expect us to bring them down. And while the ultimate control still rests at the local level, we'll do all we can to hold the line on property taxes. Here again, we have begun well. We enacted binding arbitration reform, sponsored by Senator Pete Inverso, and streamlined municipal aid programs. We absorbed the cost of the county court system and restored the property tax deduction on the state income tax, providing more than $500 million annually in direct property tax relief. We overhauled the gross receipts and franchise tax, which will provide up to $755 million for property tax relief every year. You proposed, and the voters ratified, the state mandate, state pay constitutional amendment, which has made us think twice before asking towns to take on any more state burdens. Meanwhile, due to popular demand, we've expanded our local government budget review teams. These teams have already shown 35 towns and school districts how to save property taxpayers as much as $112 million. And I've appointed a property tax commission, which will report by August 1st with proposals to further control property taxes. Our efforts have made a difference. During the past 4 years, property tax increases have been held to the lowest rate in 20 years. But we are not done. There's more we can do to help get property taxes under control. To begin with, it's about time we give local voters a real voice in the property taxes they pay. Currently, the voters don't have that opportunity. I want to change that. If a municipality wants to raise property taxes above the rate of inflation, the people should have a say. That's why I propose making these increases subject to voter approval. If local officials can make the case for higher taxes, they should do it. If they can't, then they don't get their tax increase, period. Next, we have to give mayors and council members the civil service reforms they've asked for. Nearly 70 cents of every dollar spent in government goes to pay the salaries and benefits of civil servants. Yet we retain a system in which it's almost impossible to reward success or punish failure. New Jersey is served by many fine public servants and employees. Rewarding them for success is good for them, it's good for managers, and good for taxpayers. Mayors have asked for civil service reform. Capable civil servants will benefit from it, and the taxpayers deserve it. So I'm going to begin by ordering 2 regulatory reforms. First, we will restructure our compensation system to be more in line with modern management practices. Pay raises and advancements should and will be based on merit over seniority, just as in the private sector. Second, we will eliminate a practice peculiar to state government, a practice known as bumping. Currently, every time we try to replace a mid-level manager, we have to shift as many as 10 other people, some of whom lose their jobs, even though they're doing a good job right where they are. Only in government, but no longer in New Jersey. We also need to put an end to taxpayer-funded golden parachutes. We've all heard of retirees walking away with checks for hundreds of thousands of dollars in unused sick leave. Let's limit the amount of accumulated sick leave that can be paid out to retirees by local governments. We just can't afford it anymore. And then we should provide local government with greater flexibility in hiring. For example, some states appoint all new state hires to non-civil service, non-unionized positions. This may go too far for our state, but I am prepared to sign legislation that would at least allow municipalities to opt out of civil service altogether. Let's put local officials back in charge of their local workforce. These steps will help reduce current costs and help keep them under control at the local level. Some of them are controversial, but I'm committed to giving local officials all the tools they need. And if they're as serious about controlling property taxes as I am, they'll use them. There's one part of the property tax burden I haven't addressed yet, the largest part, the part that pays for our public schools. It's no secret that New Jersey spends more on education per pupil than any other state in the Union. It's also clear that we're not always getting what we pay for. Of course, over the past 4 years, we've done a lot to change that. to improve the education we offer our children. Again, we have begun well. For the first time ever, we have established rigorous academic standards that will ensure that every child in New Jersey, every child, gets the education he or she deserves. We've made New Jersey the only state in the union to test its students 3 times in 4th, 8th, and 11th grades to ensure that they're learning what they should. And I think it bears repeating. New Jersey continues to be blessed with some of the best schools and some of the best teachers anywhere in America. Of course, we've also been fortunate to have had the services of 2 outstanding legislators, Senator Jack Ewing and Assemblyman John Rocco, who have done so much during their careers on behalf of our students. Wait a minute, get back down. I'll do this later. It's not the time. Well, you've all anticipated me. As chairs of the education committees of their respective houses, they have dedicated themselves to improving education in our state, and I thank you for already having joined me in extending our best wishes to them in the years ahead. And Jack and John, thank you once more for everything. Our challenge is to continue to build on the good work of these 2 legislators. There is, after all, still more to do, both to improve the education of our children and to ensure that taxpayers get what they pay for. I remember very well the feeling I had the first time each of my children went off to school. It's tough for parents, even under the best of conditions, to send their child off to kindergarten, to let go of that little hand as your child starts off on a big adventure. It's even worse, many times worse, when you know your child's school isn't ready to give your son or daughter a good education. I want every New Jersey parent to be able to send their child off to school with confidence and pride. Confidence in both their child and in their child's school. I do not believe that we can, in good conscience, continue to force parents to send their children to failing schools if a better choice is readily available. Right now, only 2 groups of people in New Jersey have the benefit of school choice. The first are those who can afford to send their children to private or parochial schools. The second are public school teachers who can send their kids to the schools in the district in which they live or in which they teach, whichever they choose. I believe all New Jersey parents deserve the right to choose the public schools their children attend. New Jersey is fast becoming a leader in the creation of innovative charter schools. And to supplement our charter school program, the Comprehensive Educational Improvement and Financing Act, or CEFA, authorizes the development of a public school choice program. I call on the State Board of Education to adopt by the beginning of next school year the rules governing this program and to have pilot programs ready to go. Then, by September of 1999, public school choice will be a reality in every county in New Jersey. We shouldn't leave this century without it. There are 2 other actions I am ready to take to improve accountability in our schools. The first is to reform and perhaps even eliminate tenure for public school principals. let me be clear. Most of New Jersey's school principals are doing a fine job, and research shows that effective principals are the key to school quality. They set the vision for a school. They mobilize parents and teachers to pursue that vision. Where a principal has no vision, the children suffer. So I believe it's time we began to match the enormous responsibility of a principal's job with greater accountability. Let's work together to reform principal tenure, to create a system that guarantees fairness but expects results. Our children deserve nothing less. In fact, there's something our children deserve more of, more instructional time in their school day. It might surprise you to learn that schools are only required to provide 4 hours of instructional time each day. 4 hours. Many kids spend more time than that in front of the television set. To be fair, most of our schools exceed that minimum requirement on most school days. But as our students prepare for the next century, we should ensure that learning is never just a part-time endeavor. Children today have a lot more to learn than we did when we were in school. I remember asking my daughter once why she hadn't done too well on a history exam, and she explained, "Mom, there's a lot more history to learn now than when you were in school." I have to admit that it's true. Our kids do have a lot more to learn, especially with our new rigorous academic standards. That is why I am asking the State Board of Education to increase the minimum length of instructional time in a school day in New Jersey to at least 6 hours. Our students deserve to get the most from every school day in both the quality and the quantity of learning. These proposals will help ensure that New Jersey's children are getting the best education we can provide. But there's another issue that underlines any discussion about education and about property taxes. That's how we fund and organize public education in our state. To begin with, I want to put an end to the frankly anti-democratic way we conduct school elections. The biggest item on everyone's property tax bill is education, and yet only a tiny fraction of the public ever votes in their local school elections. The current system actually seems designed to discourage broad public participation. School elections aren't held in June or November with the primaries or general elections, but rather in April. In many places, citizens cannot vote until after work because the polls aren't open in the morning time. Some of them can't get there at all. Then they're stunned when their property tax bill arrives. That's just not right. We live in a democracy, and democracy only works if people participate. Assembly Leader Leonard Lance has he's not an assembly leader, excuse me, leader. He is a leader, but he's not the leader. Assemblyman Leonard Lance has introduced legislation that would have school board elections, that would move school board elections. I support his goal of increasing voter participation in these elections. On average, 3 times as many people go to the polls in November as they do in April. And school board members are responsible for the largest part of your property tax bill. That is why I believe we should move the election of school board members to November. That action should be followed by moving the vote on school budgets as well. The eventual elimination of a separate school election will save taxpayers $4 million a year statewide. And more important, it will increase public participation in the process of electing school boards and deciding budgets. Of course, there will be those who say it can't be done. Well, it won't be done overnight. But I believe that we can overcome any obstacles that stand in the way of this common-sense, taxpayer-friendly proposal. After all, the largest part of the property tax bill shouldn't be decided by the smallest part of the electorate. As everyone knows, the cost of education is indeed the largest part of the property tax bill. Major property tax relief probably will not occur unless we find efficiencies in the way we operate our public school system, which brings me to a sensitive and difficult issue. Within the next several weeks, we will hear from the Regionalization Advisory Panel established as part of CEFA. This panel will call on the state to reduce the number of school districts and consolidate services among them. They believe that we need to take a good, hard look at whether maintaining more than 600 school districts is the best way to educate our children and the best way to use our educational dollars. In short, the panel would have us engage on a course that could eventually lead to forced regionalization of some school districts. We all recognize from a policy standpoint the enormous potential consolidation carries for reducing property taxes. But we also know that the people of this state treasure the high degree of local control they exercise over their neighborhood schools. I know where I stand on this issue. I have long opposed the forced regionalization of schools. Regionalization won't work if the people of New Jersey don't want it. So it's time to find out how New Jerseyans really feel about it. We need to discuss whether we're willing to give up some degree of local control of our school districts for significantly lower property taxes. Our schools are so important. Their future should not be dealt with in a quiet little report. Any conversation about change should be soundly debated, fully in the public eye and with full public participation. Governor Minor once said that submitting important questions to the people makes for a livelier, more responsive, and responsible democracy. I agree, and I imagine discussion of this question will really liven things up. That is why that I propose we bring this debate to the ballot for the voters' decision. Our goal is not to end the cherished practice of neighborhood schools and local control. It's to give the people a say in how we get control of school spending and how we make New Jersey a more affordable place in which to live and to work and to raise a family. New Jerseyans work hard for their money. We have to work harder to help them keep it. There's one last subject I want to address today, crime in New Jersey. The most fundamental right of people living in a civilized society is the right to be safe from crime. That's why we worked overtime to prevent crime, and when crimes have been committed, to punish criminals to the fullest extent of the law. Truly, we have begun well. We have graduated 400 new state troopers in 4 years. We've been single-minded in our determination to support our valiant men and women in blue who are true heroes. We've added tough new laws to the books, like 3 strikes and you're in, on which Senator Lou Costco worked so hard, and no early release, which Senator Bennett and then Assemblywoman Diane Allen championed. These laws make sure that no criminals escape proper punishment. And of course, we can all take pride in Megan's Law, a national model and the product of the special efforts of Senator Inverso and Assembly members Paul Kramer and Barbara Wright. The nation's highest courts have made it clear the public has a right to know about convicted sex offenders in their communities. And our efforts are paying off. Since 1994, we've put more criminals behind bars and we've increased the length of time they spend there. That's especially true for violent criminals, whose sentences are 13% longer than they were just 4 years ago. Clearly, these measures are making our communities safer and our families more secure. In 1996, crime dropped to the lowest level in 23 years, and our most recent statewide statistics indicate that if we keep up our good work, crime will continue to decline. We have begun well, but we aren't finished yet. I believe we should make it easier to keep still dangerous sex offenders away from our children, even after they've served their criminal sentences. Under Megan's law, we've already kept more than 80 such predators in civil commitment beyond their initial prison terms. We should expand that authority. Senator Bob Martin has already done enormous good work on this important issue, and a Kansas statute to expand civil commitment was recently upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court. Let's enact a similar law here in New Jersey. Let's make it easier to keep sex offenders locked up and harder for them to prey on our children and their families again. We must also do more to better protect our neighborhoods from gun-toting drug dealers and drug users. What's more frightening than the thought of somebody high on drugs waving a gun around? How many more innocent victims have to be caught in the crossfire between drug dealers? Let's make sure that there are no more victims by enacting a harsher punishment for possession of a firearm while possessing illegal drugs. All our tough crime laws are about the future. Today, I promise that we will continue to be vigilant, to give law enforcement and our communities the tools they need to protect our citizens and laws to get criminals off the streets and into jail. After all, a safe state is a good place in which to live and work and raise a family. I know that's a goal we all share. By making New Jersey more affordable, better educated, and safer, we are continuing to create a New Jersey that all citizens can be proud to call home. Members of the legislature, over the next 4 years, we have the privilege to shape the future of a state that has been shaping the future of the nation since its earliest days. Crossroads of the Revolution, the birthplace of baseball and the electric light, and the entrance to America, Ellis Island, New Jersey. We can add to that legacy. We can make New Jersey the best place to live in America. And we can do this by building on the record of the past 4 years, a record which shows that indeed we have begun well. At this halfway point in my service as governor of New Jersey, it's wonderful to look back before launching full speed ahead, maybe even 65 miles an hour, into my next term. What I remember best from these first 4 years are the wonderful people that I have met along the way. The young working mother who now has health insurance for her child. The new state trooper who is excitedly looking forward to a lifetime of service. The senior citizen caring for a grandchild after school. And the fresh-faced youngster fired up with eagerness to learn. These faces continually come to mind when I come to work here in Trenton. In everything I do, I strive to remember who I am working for, the men and women who have honored us with this public trust, the great people of the state of New Jersey, the many faces that make up our one family, the future. Thank you very much.
So Governor Whitman concludes her fourth State of the State address with a round of applause from those gathered at a joint session of the legislature in the Assembly chambers here in Trenton this afternoon. And the governor said she wants to make New Jersey a more affordable place, a place with better schools, and a place where every citizen can call their neighborhoods and their streets safe. We are going to now rejoin Michael Aron in the Assembly chamber with some reaction to the governor's State of the State address just concluded this afternoon. Michael?
Kent, the governor is making her way out of the chamber. She's talking to legislators who are congratulating her. As you noted, she ticked off her priorities, an affordable state, a state with good schools, a safe state. She ticked off 6 accomplishments. The oratorical thread in her speech came from Aristotle by way of her parents, who said, half begun is well done. Well begun is half done. That was the phrase. The governor is moving out of the chamber now. This was a fairly substantive speech. There were a number of interesting, new, unexpected proposals in this speech. The governor thanked the legislative leaders in advance for real auto insurance reform by March the 30th. She had a number of property tax initiatives, among them asking municipalities, giving municipalities the right to end the civil service system and having voters approve any local tax hikes that exceed the rate of inflation. Her most bold proposals were in the area of the schools, where she promised school choice by the fall of 1998 on a pilot basis. Public school choice. Kids can go to whatever public school their parents wish them to, statewide by 1999. Ending principal tenure, November school board elections instead of April, and a dialogue on regionalization of New Jersey's many school districts. Those were the highlights. Her inauguration speech is 1 week from today. Let's send it back to you now, Ken. I'm Michael Aron in the Assembly chamber.
Michael, she gathered applause when she referenced Ellis Island as Ellis Island, New Jersey, and she said she's speeding into her second term, perhaps at 65 miles an hour, a reference to the new legislation calling for a change in New Jersey's speed regulations to 65 miles an hour on some of the state's roadways. Well, we are now going to take a break in our coverage, our NJN coverage of the governor's State of the State address. And when we come back, we will have the Democratic response to Governor Whitman's address. We'll be right back. Hello, I'm Kent Manahan, and welcome back to NJN's coverage of Governor Whitman's State of the State address. The governor finished her speech just a few moments ago, and we are now going to bring you the Democratic response to the governor's State of the State address. NJN State House correspondent Jim Hooker joins us now with 2 members of the minority party. Jim?
Thanks, Ken. I'm joined now by State Senator John Adler of Camden County, who is the Assistant Senate Minority Leader, and Assemblyman Anthony Impreveduto, who is the Assembly Minority Conference Leader. We'll start with Senator Adler. Senator Adler, your general reactions to the governor's address we just heard.
Well, I was struck by how little the governor really had to offer the people of New Jersey. She's had several months to really think about what she should do in a second term. Maybe she's had 4 years to think about her second term, because I think she thought all along she'd have a second term. And it's surprising to me that there's such little she has to offer in the areas that she even talked about. She chose to talk about the things that are on voters' minds, on residents' minds here in New Jersey. Auto insurance and its very high cost for drivers, education and the questionable quality for a lot of parents in a lot of different parts of our state, property taxes, again, the highest in the nation. And I was struck by how little she wanted to really do to bring the costs down. She's asked the legislature to solve the auto insurance crisis that's fallen upon all the drivers of the state. She's asking mayors and other municipal leaders to solve the property tax problem, maybe with the help of voters in November elections who will have maybe the power to vote to approve or to disapprove property tax increases for the municipal portion. She didn't really tell us a lot about how she was going to bring down costs for the average homeowner or improve quality for the average public school student. And I think that's got to feel empty for those of us, not as Democrats, but those of us as New Jersey residents who want vision, who want to see New Jersey moving forward, not as a Democrat or Republican state, as a state where people can live, can retire, can raise children successfully and happily and safely. I didn't get a sense that she's got a vision of where she wants to take our state. And really today was a day for her to chart a course for all of us to follow.
Okay, I thought that she laid out a couple of initiatives that were rather specific, but we'll get to those in a minute. And we'll talk more about your view on this, but let's hear from Assemblyman Impreveduto. Your view, your general view on
Jim, everyone has said that the governor really needed to hit the ground running with this speech. This would be the first of 3 high-profile speeches, and in order for her to put the luster back on her vase, she needed to really hit the ground running with this particular speech. I didn't see that. I didn't see that this was the speech to put that luster back on, to make her shine again. She's coming off about 4 months of a rough beating. Her insurance, auto insurance program was soundly defeated by her own Republican legislature. The partial birth abortion, which was her veto was overridden, and then she nearly lost her governorship with somewhat less than a percentage point, somewhere around 40,000 votes. So she was a beat-up governor coming into this speech. I agree with John. There was no vision here. We rehashed a lot of the old things just last year. She proposed her automobile insurance reform package, which didn't happen. A year before that, it was the education program, which we're back to again. I didn't see anything new. I saw no new vision. A lot of history, nothing new happening here. I think she's a governor in trouble at this point in time. The thing that threw me the most, however, was the fact that she talks about the voters deciding. Let the voters decide whether or not we want to raise the budget in a municipality. Let the voters decide if we're going to regionalize our schools. And yet at the same time, she did the largest bond issue in the state's history. She did a $2.8 billion bond issue that's going to cost the taxpayers about $15 billion to pay back. The taxpayers, the voters, didn't have a say in that. I find that kind of strange and a little contradictory to what she's been saying here at this speech.
Okay. Both of you seem to talk about the history that she brought up. Maybe we can take this speech maybe we can take it in 2 bites, which would be the first 4 years. She seemed to go over 4 years, and we don't have to go over all 4 years, but I'll throw out a couple of high points that she mentioned, and maybe you guys can say what you think about it, the other side, as it were. And then we'll go to what she sees in the next 4. She talked about creation of 250,000 jobs, crime at a 23-year low, open space preservation, over 100,000 acres, welfare rolls cut by 1/3, cities coming back strong, and some downsizing of government. As I saw it, those were the big hits that she talked about. Either one of you want to take
welfare, I think you need to thank then Assemblyman, now Senator Wayne Bryant. Wayne was the proponent of the welfare reform. So the things that have happened in New Jersey work first. Wayne was the initiator of most of these things, and she's taking
Senate Democrat from Camden County.
Senate Democrat from Camden County. You agree with that?
I disagree with that. Even though I give Wayne Bryant tremendous credit, I think you have to thank Alan Greenspan in Washington, D.C. We've had a national economy that's been historically strong. It's never been this strong for this many years. This sort of sustained growth. Every state has benefited, and all boats rise with the tide. It's been a wonderful thing. It's taken people off welfare rolls and given them work, sometimes just entry-level jobs, but some people moving forward with real careers, and that's a wonderful thing. I don't take that away from the governor. I don't give it to the governor. I give it to the fact that our national economy has done well, and all people benefit from a strong national economy. We should do what we can in New Jersey to help augment what the federal government is doing or declining to do, to let the national economy grow. We should do more in the state of New Jersey to help grow our own economy. But we can't look at this in a narrow context. Our whole nation has just benefited tremendously from just tremendous growth over the last several years. And
so the governor got lucky.
Oh, I think there's no question about that. I don't mean to take anything away from Senator Bryant.
According to you.
I live very close to him, so I don't want him coming to my house tonight to yell at me.
Well, it was his welfare reform package, I think, is what Assemblyman
But he'd be the first to say, in a down economy, we'd have more people on welfare. We have an up economy right now. We want to keep trying to have an up economy for many years to come.
I found it interesting, and I find it interesting here. You don't want to give the governor credit, nor did she want to give you credit. When she mentioned some of these things, she thanked the majority leader, I think, and the speaker, and she didn't mention a Democrat, if I'm not mistaken, in the speech.
It was an oversight. It's the 4th oversight she's had.
I think I remember Democrats in the past getting at least some mention.
Maybe dead ones.
I think she talked about a bipartisan panel. I guess that's as close as we're going to get to being named.
No, Tony, by bipartisan, she means Assembly and
Senate. Well, that's always
a different definition than we do.
But Jim, I want to come back to some of the points. I mean, if we listen to the speech, we heard Jim McGreevy's stump speech. A lot of the issues that Jimmy McGreevy raised during the election, the auto insurance, the property tax, education. I mean, obviously she heard the last week of that campaign. I mean, we saw her come on television and say, "Hey, I heard what you're saying." I guess she did. I mean, Jim coming that close to her scared her. And the part that disappoints me, though, is that she's not answering the bell. She's not helping to solve those problems. She's going to leave it to the voters to solve the problems.
Okay, I've heard a couple of the commentators today here at NJN, and I guess some of the observers looking as well from the outside, talking about some bold proposals. Neither of you seem to see it that way. She did talk about auto insurance and property taxes head on at the outset for the next 4 years, right?
But she didn't mention the proposal. For
but
auto
she didn't
insurance,
have, on auto insurance, she has the committee.
She had her entire State of the State address dedicated to auto insurance, and we saw no relief. Our rates did not go down here in New Jersey. Mine didn't, yours didn't.
What could a governor do?
Governor could force the legislature to come into session and address this issue.
Mm-hmm. The legislature could mandate a premium cut.
Okay, well, she also talked about property taxes, and there we had a very popular Republican governor some years ago who didn't really do much about it, Governor Kane, who was reelected with 70% plurality. This governor with a 1% plurality. It seemed to me that a lot of her property tax proposals were sent down to the local level.
Well, let's talk about her property tax proposals. Since she's been the governor, property taxes in New Jersey have increased by $2 billion.
And I think she made the point that it's the least that they've increased in 20-some years over that period.
I don't know those numbers exactly, but I would question that. Secondly, what I found interesting, she said, backed by popular demand, her audit teams are going to go back out to the municipalities. And then she talks about 35 towns and school districts have used them. Well, last I looked, there were 566 towns and over 600 school districts, and only 35 have used them. Mm-hmm. So I don't see the popular demand here. And I don't know what they've done. I mean, we don't know what the result of those have been.
Okay. Can we tick off a couple of the specific proposals that she made? I'd like to know whether Democrats would be in favor of this or not, and I think the viewers would wonder. Proposal changes on the local level. Civil service could be dropped by the local town if the town wanted to. Local budgets over the rate of inflation go to the voter. School budgets, those votes go to November. You guys can catch me up if I'm missing something. And the other one was school district consolidation. There are 4 out on your plate. What do the Democrats think of this?
All those proposals touched on potentially bold ideas, but didn't really go into them. Mm-hmm. If she's going to talk about having November elections, she should talk about having November elections for everything across the board. Fire districts in those towns that have fire districts, all school elections, nonpartisan towns having their elections in November, really consolidate elections. If we're going to talk about elections, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but let's talk about it in the broadest form. If we're going to talk about reform of hiring and retaining practices for public employees, why is it civil service and only some educators? She picked on principals, didn't talk about teachers. If you're going to talk about broad reform, put it out on the table and let's talk about it in real terms. I think she mentioned one thing that most people of both parties, at least philosophically, like to discuss in greater detail, the idea of eliminating these golden parachutes for unused sick days. There's been some examples of people walking away with hundreds of thousands of dollars. School superintendents are the best example, but other public employees.
Right.
That's a sort of easy one. But let's talk about some of these things in a broader context and see if there really is a consensus to do something in ways that will really reduce cost increases for municipal governments, for schools, for counties, to help bring down the property tax rate.
All right, so you talked about tenure and the elections. So then let's hear from the Assemblyman. Tenure and the elections.
Well, tenure, I think, look, we need to have an open mind, certainly, on all, and I agree with John. If we're going to look at elections, why are we just saying November elections and
why not
and school board
start somewhere, though?
Well, why not them all? If we're going to do the package, do the package.
Sometimes it's harder, is it not, to bite off the entire universe than to bite off little pieces?
Why would that be? If you're going to have elections in November, April, and May, which you currently have now, why shouldn't there be elections in November?
We had them in February too for school
districts. Fire districts. You could even hold the fire districts off if you wanted to. But the important thing is if you elect mayors and councils in May, you elect mayors and councils in November, and you elect school boards in April. Why not put them all into November? And I'll give you the reason why. The Republican Party certainly doesn't want to have November elections for all mayors and councils because most Democratic cities, large cities, have their mayoral and council elections in May. So if you put those folks in November, that's going to draw lots of Democrats to the polls in certain years that may put governors back as Democrats again.
That could be one answer, I guess. Okay, how about the school budgets?
Well, school budgets currently are elected in those Type 2 school districts. They'll continue to be elected in Type 2 school districts.
Historically, very few people turn out for those. And as the governor said, it is the major part of your property tax.
I don't have a problem with that. And I don't think John did either.
You don't
I think putting the elections in November is not a problem as long as put them all there.
But for a lot of
school districts, that doesn't help really address the problem of how to contain costs. What the governor might have said that would have been really useful is that the state will now take over special education costs. If she had said that, those few words would have been very bold.
Does that contain costs or just shift it?
It shifts costs the way when we shifted costs from the court system from counties to the states. First of all, we were fair to the urban counties that have a disproportionate cost because of urban crime. We have the same thing if we could shift special education costs, which really hurt some municipalities and some school districts.
Absolutely.
When you have 1 or 2 kids in a small district, that can throw your whole budget out of whack and raise your property tax.
In fact, I've had legislation in to take the special education costs out of the cap, out from underneath the cap. You send a kid out of district who's a severely handicapped kid, it could cost your Board of Education $100,000 a year or more.
That would be bold. If you want to talk about reducing property taxes, that would be a bold proposal.
We didn't hear that, though. We didn't hear those kinds of things.
Did I hear the governor say that school district consolidation should go to a referendum? Is that what she was saying?
She didn't actually articulate the language of what she would propose as a ballot question, but the language guarantees that the proposal would fail. She's saying, should the state mandate? Once you say the state mandate, it's going to fail no matter what.
Should the state mandate regionalization?
Right. Well, the words state mandate, the rest of the question is no, it doesn't matter.
Well, I think plus the fact that I think she knows that most people, take an elementary school situation, most people want their kids to go to the neighborhood school. Quite honestly, they don't want their kid traveling 10 miles to go to school if they're in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade. I mean, I've got a 7-year-old and I've got two older children, one in graduate school, one in college. And quite honestly, I like the idea of having my son going to school at the neighborhood school, and I'm not so sure if I want to send my son to a town 10 miles away to go to school.
That you're leading toward the public school choice initiative, which was another one that the governor talked about, which could be a hot potato, I would think.
Well, I don't know how you do that, quite honestly.
What do Democrats think of public school choice?
Quite honestly, I don't know how you do that. I mean, if my local property taxes are paying for my school system, I don't know how I deal with someone else's children coming to my school and not paying for that.
Senator Adler.
We currently have a form of school choice where if a school decides to accept a kid,
absolutely, yeah,
and the parents of the child are willing to pay the tuition to send the child, that is already permissible in the public school context right now, and it's done in a lot of municipalities, including some of my district. The idea that Tony raises of how you allocate the funds properly, you may have some school districts that come out in the short end because their kids are being taken out, and that's unfair to those districts and to the remaining kids. It's the same sort of school voucher creaming problem again in a public school context. There's some kinks in that may really end up hurting a lot of students in our society.
If you're doing it in the sense of helping to improve the school system, you're not doing that. Because what's going to happen is the cream is which is just going to be skimmed off, and those kids are going to go somewhere else, and you'll have systems in the inner city, maybe Jersey City or Newark or somewhere else, that what will be left in that system will be the absolute worst of the system, and that's what you don't want to see. If you really want to destroy a system, that's the way you do it.
Couldn't everybody in the system say, I'm heading over to the other system?
If there was somebody else to take them.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've got schools that are already overcrowded in lots of places.
Yeah, the receiving district has a choice in this too. They can say, no, we don't want this group of kids. That shuts the door for a lot of kids that will then be prejudiced to remain in the otherwise sending district.
Back to principal tenure, if we can, for a second. You said, why not all teachers? Let me put the question to you. Why not all teachers? Why isn't the governor
I would like to talk about the principal piece before we go into all teachers.
Go ahead.
And if we talk about the principal tenure, certainly have an open mind on that, but I think we need to look at some real important things. Governor talked about the fact that New Jersey was rated as one of the top 10 places to raise your children. So that means we must have a pretty good school system here in New Jersey. We're one of the top 10 states to raise your children in. That's number one. Number two, she said the majority of principals, the vast majority of principals, most of them are good people doing real good work. So we would change a whole system for a few, number one. And I think we need to really look at that. And then how much do we politicize that system? By saying, well, the mayor's nephew needs a job, therefore the guy that's there should be out, but put the mayor's nephew in. And the third thing, do we worry about the fact that my principal's in, we give him a 2-year contract, now in his second year, his pay is getting kind of high. We need to cut the budget. We know he's done a real good job. We need to get rid of him and bring in a guy that's going to work for much cheaper.
Let me stop you there. Those are a couple of good reasons, as you see it, not to eliminate principal tenure. We've spent a lot of time on education. Your call if you wanted to stay with it, but there are a couple other issues she also talked about, and one of them was civil service reform. And I was wondering, is this a slug perhaps back at the unions after they're not supporting her election? I wonder if that'll be some of what we'll hear from Democrats, not supporting her in the election, that she's now.
You said it, I didn't, but of course it clearly is. There's no question.
I'm asking a question.
No, it is. No, you said it beautifully. Let me go back to the school thing just for 1 second, because I think rather than just attack the tenure system for principals, what the governor might more properly have done is attack the system that protects those people in either teaching positions or principal positions who are doing a bad job. Absolutely. Find a way to get rid of those people so that students and taxpayers get the bang for the buck. So students get education, so taxpayers aren't seeing their costs rise year after year. Right now we've got a system that protects people if they're not doing a good job, but also protects people who are doing a good job. And we shouldn't dismantle a good system. We should find a way to get rid of the bad apples.
Some people would say that same principle applies in civil service. Well, and the governor is talking about a total.
Let's talk about civil service.
And the governor is talking about it.
Absolutely, she is. But she's not talking. If you're not civil service, doesn't mean you're not union. Well, let's look at this. If you're not a civil servant, the town from which I come is not a civil service town, but everybody's involved in a union. I mean, the police are with the PBA, and the workers are with whatever union they're with. I believe they're with the Teamsters. So they're all with unions. And when you have a union negotiating the contract. There's no difference here. You never, unless she's saying that no town employee, no municipal employee can belong to a union. I don't think she's saying that.
She's saying, I think she's giving that she would like a state law that gives local towns the option of carrying civil service or not. So you could hire.
Again, you already have that option. My town is not a civil service town. Mm-hmm. The option's there. It's nothing new. You can't have it or you don't have to have it if you don't want to. If she does away with civil service, it doesn't exist anymore, let's say. It's not going to stop unions from coming into your town and your people from organizing. We wouldn't want that, I don't think. We're not a union-busting state. If that's what she's intending to do, I think she's taking certainly the wrong vehicle to do that.
What is your take on her civil service initiatives that she mentioned in this speech today?
I would, in this case, go back to what I said about principals and tenure. I think we should institute a system that allows the chief executive of a municipality, of a county, of a state, to get rid of bad actors, those that aren't doing their job. And maybe we should liberalize the definition of inadequate performance so that we can get rid of those employees at whatever level who are not fulfilling their job function properly. As long as that function is defined adequately, so there's not just the sort of politicization that Tony talked about. The idea of getting rid of the bad guys is great, but the idea of disrupting a system that's protected people and allowed them not to be political, allowed them to do a governmental function without fear of political reprisal, is a good idea. It's worked for 100 years. The same Teddy Roosevelt that she mentioned, or Don DeFrancesco mentioned in a speech today maybe, about preserving open space. That same Teddy Roosevelt was one of the real advocates for
You want to stay
service.
away from the Boss Tweed
right.
Yeah, and I think the real reason for civil service was so that if I wanted to be a policeman in a municipality, I took a test. And the people that ranked on that civil service test were the people that were interviewed and received the job. I think if you do away with that, what do you put in its place?
One of the areas we didn't touch on, we have just a couple of minutes left, was crime. Governor threw out just a couple of initiatives that she wanted to deal with.
Democrats are against crime.
We don't like crime.
We feel very
We absolutely don't like crime.
We have you on the record there.
What did the governor really say on that? She said crime's gone down. We're going to keep working at it. She hasn't really put any new initiatives.
It's down.
The Democrats
well, the three strikes law. I think Megan's law. You guys were all on board together on.
So bipartisan.
Bipartisan stuff. But the other thing we need to remember is crime has been down, I believe, nationwide.
Nothing wrong with a little bipartisanship, is there?
No, but we wanted vision today. We wanted where we're going with the state, not where the state.
I think we were looking for leadership. I think leadership wasn't there. I think she's throwing the ball back to the people and saying, I don't know what to do. Therefore, you need to go to the polls and tell me what you want me to do.
So Democrats working with Republicans in the next legislative session. We have about 90 seconds left. Why don't you each take a piece of that?
I think that certainly Democrats working with Republicans have always been there. I mean,
what you'll be looking for in the next legislative session?
As far as?
What you'll be offering Republicans in terms of helpful hands and getting some.
Well, I don't think there's too much to offer. I mean, the bills are posted by them. I'm on a committee with Assemblyman Jeff Moran. We're close friends. We've probably done more bipartisan legislation than anyone in the history of the legislature, I would suspect.
Do you see yourselves working hand in hand with Republicans,
we always have.
or is it going to be a battle
we always have.
from day one?
I don't think it's anything.
When they've let us, we have. I think you'll see us working very hard on property tax relief and auto insurance, the same things the governor finally talked about after a couple years of silence. We've understood all along those are the issues that matter to people. We're going to address them, and hopefully the Republicans will let us help craft legislation to help the people of New Jersey.
Okay, Senator Adler, Assemblyman Impreveduto.
My pleasure.
That's all the time we have. Thanks for joining us, and we'd like to send it back to Kent Manahan. Kent?
Jim, thank you. Our NJN coverage has just brought you the Democratic response to Governor Whitman's State of the State address this afternoon. And that concludes our coverage of the governor's address today. NJN will continue the coverage and all of the rest of today's news at 6 o'clock and at 7:30 and 11 tonight on NJN News. We hope you'll join us then. I'm Kent Manahan. For Michael Aron, Roger Bodman, Jim McQueeny, and Jim Hooker, thank you for being with us this afternoon.